All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about in our lecture today is gross domestic product. And while you're watching this, what you're going to want to do is, I'm going to talk for a while, and then you're going to want to go to these links. The PowerPoint is also posted, so you can click on these in the PowerPoint. It's also on my blog, so if you go to the website, you find my blog. These links are all on here, and you can go watch them while you're taking lecture notes. That'd be my recommendation for you to do. But let's look at our definitions now, and starting with what is gross domestic product. So pretty much you got the definition up there. Gross domestic product is the total dollar value of all goods and services produced over a specific time period. Usually it'll be like monthly, actually most common will be yearly. So everything that is produced, and this could be for a government like the United States. It could be everything, all the goods, all the services that the United States produces over a year. This could be for the state of Minnesota. It could be for the city of Minneapolis. So total dollar value, goods and services produced over a specific time. Could be for a city, a state. Usually it's for countries is what we want to think of. So again, it's the market value, all final goods and products that are sold, and again, usually it's within a year. There's 2 links on there. You may go to these and watch these, and it'll explain it a little more. Now we're going to look at aggregate demand, which is almost the exact same thing as gross domestic product. So gross domestic product and aggregate demand are very well linked. Here you'll see we have a demand curve. And this is an aggregate demand curve, which means a total demand curve. And this is very similar to gross domestic product. Aggregate demand, by definition, is the total demand for goods and services in an economy. It's often considered pretty much the same as a gross domestic product at any given point in time. So we see on here we have a demand curve. This is the total demand of goods at all price levels. We have price levels here, and here's the national output, or this is pretty much our quantity here, quantity, price, and here's the demand for all products. What I mean by all products, that means everything from iPhones to candy bars to cars to tires to even services like haircuts, tattoo shops, piercings, anything you can sell pretty much, goods and services. The overall demand at all price levels is right here. So how do we figure out aggregate demand? It's pretty hard to figure out because you have to figure out all sales of every single good. That would be hard to calculate. That would be hard to calculate even for Minneapolis or even just Lake Street. So how do you figure that out? Well, you got to take like kind of surveys, and you got to do some estimating on here. But pretty much you take our simple math problem. Here's how we figure it out. We have the C. The C stands for consumption. We have consumption, how much consumers who buy goods and services. Then we add on that investment. Investment means things you buy and you're trying to make money off of. For example, some people who invest buy houses because they want to sell them. Stock would include here, any kind of stock. So if I think that, oh, Apple's a good company, I'm going to buy some Apple stock, and maybe that'll go up in the future. I'm not really buying a product, that's an investment I'm trying to make money off of. This would also include retirement plans. My retirement plan is an investment. So that's part of aggregate demand. So all goods that are bought and all investments that people are trying to make money off of. And then we have this G here, which is government spending, which is also a pretty big part of aggregate demand. All the things that the government buys. This could be from anything that would include road construction. This could include building of schools. This could include public libraries, parks, military spending, which is a big chunk of it too. Social Security, pensions that are paid out to people who are retired, welfare benefits, food stamps, all these things are included in aggregate demand. And then finally, our last one here are net exports. So what do I mean by net exports? Take all the exports you have, and then minus everything you import. So take everything you ship out of the country, and then subtract that from everything you import in the country. And for the U.S., this is actually a negative number because we import more goods than we export. So this is, for goods it is. For services, it's actually, we give more services out than we import. But you add up all these together and you come up with aggregate demand. We're going to come back to this term over and over again. So remember, aggregate demand is basically It's everything we buy, everything we invest in, everything the government spends, and then our exports minus imports. It is the demand for all goods and services, usually within a country. Usually we keep track of it by year. So aggregate demand, how's it different than GDP? GDP is right here. Gross domestic product, total dollar value of all goods and services over a period of time. Aggregate demand, pretty much the biggest difference is it's how we graph it and how we look at it on a demand and supply chart. Now let's talk about inflation. So inflation, we're going to have a couple of videos on this, on inflation and CPI, or Consumer Price Index. Take a look at this chart right here, and this will really give you a definition of inflation. So if you want a quick definition, inflation is how prices go up over time. The difference is between how much a good cost next year versus this year. So how much it will cost. Like an example could be if you're going to go to McDonald's. Back when I was in high school, almost everything on dollar menu cost $2.99 plus tax $3.18. Now, what, $5 is about the average for McDonald's value meal. That's inflation. Prices slowly go up. Usually prices go up at a rate of about 2% per year. That's about healthy inflation, somewhere between 2 and 3%. Now if we look here, we see inflation, and we look at what you can do with your money. Can you afford to buy a hammer? So let's take a look at the hammer and what happens to your money. If you have $10, and so you have $10 today, that means you invested at 5%, still $10 today, you don't get any money yet. And if you want to buy that hammer, it costs $6, so $4 left over. So maybe I want to buy the hammer. However, if I decide, I really don't need this hammer, I'm going to invest my money instead, what happens here to prices and goods? If I just take this $10 and put it on my mattress and think, I don't trust that I want my money to stay here, this is still worth $10. However, if I invest it at 5%, I get $10.05. It actually grows. But the hammer we see here is $6.18. Inflation at 3% brings this up to $6.18 over 3 years, which means things slowly get more expensive. This is why, again, when I was back in high school, if you wanted to buy a 20-ounce Mountain Dew, it cost 99 cents. Well, actually, 93 cents, $1 with tax. Now I think they're like $1.60 or something like that. They've gone up over the about 15 years or whatever since I've graduated high school. So now let's look at after 20 years. That $10 under your mattress is still $10, no change. However, after all these years with 5% investment, it eventually grows to $25.27. So if you have invested at 5%, which is a pretty good rate of investment, it grows to $25.27. However, a hammer, if it keeps going up by 3%, will cost $10.52 at 3% inflation. So inflation is, by definition, the slow increase of prices over time. And we usually measure that year by year, and healthy inflation is about 2 to 3%. Here we see a link. You may go to this it's also on the WordPress blog. It's also on the PowerPoint that's linked on the website. You may watch that and take notes as well. And let's look at inflation and how it's linked to Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index, now there's 2 videos down here that you'll be able to watch. And Consumer Price Index, by definition, I have it there for you, is the measure of average prices paid by urban consumers for a fixed market basket of goods or services. What this pretty much is, it's our basket of goods and services. You take this basket of goods that we got here, there's a whole bunch of stuff. We see mayonnaise in there, tomatoes, bread, all these things. We take everything we put in the basket, we see how much it costs this year, and then we see how much it costs next year. And it should be a little bit more expensive next year. So we take next year minus this year, look at the difference, and that would be the difference in our Consumer Price Index, and we can calculate the rate of inflation using that. So if let's say I take this basket full of goods, and we'll just take last year and this year. Let's say last year it cost $10. But this year it cost, let's say, $11. So we just subtract that, and we see there's a $1 difference between these two. And that shows us that there's about, I think it ends up being about, or exactly, I'll have to check on that, about a 10% inflation. That would actually be pretty high inflation. So this shows us the actual rate of inflation for a product. And again, you can watch these two links on that, and we'll discuss this in class as well.